Elias Boone walked into the Bitterroot Mountains in the late autumn of 1842, carrying nothing but a smoothbore musket, a powder horn, a high-carbon steel axe, and the homespun wool clothes on his back. By modern standards, he was a dead man walking. Today, search and rescue teams would be warming up the helicopters before he even crossed the tree line. Modern outdoor experts tell you that to survive 3 days in that wilderness, you need a satellite GPS beacon, a $400 sleeping bag, a titanium stove, and synthetic layers engineered in a laboratory. We call it safety. We call it progress. But the journals tell a different story. The record shows that Elias Boone did not freeze. He did not starve. When the snowdrifts piled 6 feet high in January, he was warm. When the game moved out of the valley, he still ate. He lived comfortably in a landscape that would kill a modern, fully equipped camper in a matter of hours. He never carried a water filter, a tent, a sleeping pad, or a single ounce of nylon. The 15 tricks he lived by, the forgotten knowledge that kept our ancestors alive, are not lost. They are not magic. They just do not have a price tag on them anymore. And that turns out to be the only reason you never learn them. My name is John Colton. I am 58 years old, a fifth-generation homesteader living off-grid in the Ozark Highlands. My great-grandfather carved a life out of this same dirt with hand tools and raw stubbornness. He kept a battered leather ledger where he wrote down every survival method he learned from the old-timers, the mountain men, and the indigenous tribes of this continent. He made me promise that this knowledge would not die in the modern era of convenience. This is me keeping that promise. Here are 15 forgotten frontier survival tricks counted down. Some of them you can try in your backyard tomorrow. Some of them have been practically outlawed by modern safety regulations because they do not fit into the consumer model. None of these tricks stopped working. They still work exactly as they did in 1842. They faded because somebody figured out how to charge you $200 for a plastic alternative. Let us begin the countdown. 15 down to 1. The question is not what we lost. The question is who got rich when you forgot how to survive for free. Number 15. Picture a mountain man in a heavy wool coat kneeling beside a creek. He has no metal pot. He has no cup. But he needs to boil water to make it safe to drink. Today, outdoor brands will sell you a pump-action microfilter for $150 that clogs after 2 trips. They will sell you chemical tablets that taste like a swimming pool. The mountain man simply takes his knife, strips a thick piece of bark from a fallen birch, or hollows out a chunk of wood to make a rough bowl. He fills it with water. Then he takes smooth river stones he has been heating in his campfire and drops them directly into the wooden bowl. Within seconds, the water is at a rolling boil. This is hot rock boiling. It costs absolutely nothing. The rocks are free, the wood is free, the fire is free. The gear industry did not outlaw hot rock boiling. They just convinced you that you need a stainless steel kettle and a pressurized gas canister to make a cup of pine needle tea. A modern water purification system breaks when you drop it. Hot rocks have been working flawlessly for 10,000 years. The military survival manuals still teach it, but the gear stores pray you never figure it out. Number 14. A homesteader in the 1880s needs to tie down a shelter to survive an incoming blizzard. He does not have nylon parachute cord. He does not have bungee straps. He walks over to a patch of dogbane or stinging nettle, strips the fibrous outer stalks, and twists them on his thigh. Within 20 minutes, He has 30 feet of cordage that can hold a man's weight. Today, a 100-foot spool of military-grade paracord costs $30. It is made of petroleum products, woven in a factory, and shipped across the ocean. When you run out in the woods, you are helpless. The homesteader never ran out. The forest was an endless spool of rope if you knew how to look at the inner bark of a cedar tree or the roots of a spruce. The outdoor industry trained us to buy our strength in a plastic wrapper. Rope making is a skill that costs nothing but time and friction. The indigenous peoples of America built bridges out of woven grass, but today we panic if we forget our zip ties. Notice the pattern here? Every trick so far replaces an expensive piece of modern gear with a free, natural resource. It does not get better as we go down the list. It gets much more intense. We are moving away from simple water and rope. Next, we are replacing high-tech winter clothing and expensive shelters. Number 13. A trapper in the Pacific Northwest in 1850 is staring down a week of freezing, relentless rain. He does not have a $500 Gore-Tex jacket. He does not have factory-taped seams, breathable micromembranes, or durable water-repellent coatings engineered in a chemical plant. When modern synthetic rain gear wets out after 3 or 4 hours in a heavy downpour, the moisture stops escaping. You end up soaking wet from your own sweat, trapped in a cold plastic bag. The trapper, however, stayed bone dry for months on end. How did he do it? He wore heavy cotton canvas or tightly woven duck cloth, and he waterproofed it himself using a mixture he cooked over his own campfire. He used equal parts natural beeswax and rendered animal tallow, usually deer or bear fat. He melted them down together in a dented tin cup, took a piece of rag, and heavily painted that hot liquid wax onto his coat. Then he stood close to the fire, letting the radiant heat bake that mixture deep into the fibers of the cloth. When the freezing rain hit him the next day, the water simply beat it up and rolled off like it was hitting a duck's back. This is traditional waxed canvas waterproofing. It breathes surprisingly well. It is completely silent when you walk through the brush, and most importantly, it cost him absolutely nothing but the scraps of his hunt and a wild beehive he found in an oak tree. Today, the outdoor clothing industry has built a multi-billion-dollar empire on the promise of keeping you dry. Brands will sell you synthetic jackets treated with PFAS, toxic forever chemicals that poison the very rivers you are hiking next to. And those jackets will still rip on the first sharp briar patch and lose their waterproofing after one season of hard use. The mountain man's wax jacket lasted 20 years. It was armor. If it started to leak at the shoulders, he didn't throw it in the trash and go to a sporting goods store. He just rubbed more fat on it. The gear industry wants you to think that staying dry requires a laboratory and a credit card. Your great-grandfather knew it only required a campfire and a piece of fat. They did not ban waxed canvas, they just made it feel heavy and old-fashioned, so you would keep buying fragile plastics. Number 12. The sun is dropping fast in the Colorado Rockies. The temperature is plummeting toward zero, and the wind is starting to howl at 40 miles an hour. A modern mountaineer in this situation pitches an $800 four-season expedition tent. Let me tell you a secret about that tent. It is nothing but a thin sheet of nylon. It provides absolutely zero insulation. The air inside that tent is exactly as cold as the freezing air outside. The modern camper only survives the night because he is wrapped like a mummy in a $600 down sleeping bag. If that bag gets wet, or if a branch tears it, he dies of hypothermia before sunrise. The frontiersman caught in the exact same winter storm did not carry a tent. He carried an axe. In under an hour, he built a debris hut. He dragged a sturdy ridgepole up into the crux of a tree or a stump. He laid thick branches down the sides to form a wooden rib cage. Then he piled 3 feet of dead leaves, pine needles, dirt, and forest floor debris on top of that frame. He crawled inside this tight cocoon, leaving only a tiny fist-sized hole near his face for ventilation, and stuffed the entrance with a plug of dry leaves. That 3 feet of natural debris trapped millions of tiny pockets of dead air. It acted exactly like the thick fiberglass insulation inside the walls of your home. By midnight, while the blizzard raged outside at 10 degrees, the ambient temperature inside that tiny dirt shelter was a balmy 65 degrees. It was heated entirely by the thermal radiation of his own body. He slept comfortably in his wool shirt. The debris hut is a thermal masterpiece. It is the ultimate survival shelter, utilizing the physics of conduction, convection, and radiation perfectly. It costs $0. It requires 0 synthetic fibers. You can build it in almost any forest on Earth. But the outdoor retailers cannot sell you a pile of pine needles. They need you to believe that your survival depends entirely on buying an aluminum pole and a brightly colored nylon dome. The Boy Scouts used to teach the debris hut as a foundational, mandatory skill. Now, managed state parks will fine you for moving dead branches. They traded your ability to stay alive for a pristine-looking campground. The knowledge is still there, waiting in the dirt. Notice how the industry has shifted your reliance away from your own 2 hands and onto their assembly lines. Every time you buy a piece of modern survival gear, you are outsourcing your safety to a factory in another country. The mountain man kept his safety exactly where it belonged, in his own head. The next 2 tricks are going to change how you look at the most basic, everyday tasks of wilderness living. We are going to replace a heavy, expensive camp kitchen with 1 piece of scavenged trash. And we are going to look at a forgotten method of preserving food that the modern refrigeration industry hopes you never remember. Number 11. It is 1825 on the northern plains of the American frontier. A Métis trapper is preparing for a winter expedition that will take him 6 months and cover nearly 1,000 miles of brutal, freezing terrain. He does not pack a portable camping stove. He does not pack a cooler. And he certainly does not pack freeze-dried, vacuum-sealed astronaut meals. To survive today, outdoor brands want you to spend $15 on a single pouch of dehydrated beef stroganoff that gives you barely 600 calories and a massive spike in sodium. For a week-long trip, you need a heavy bear canister stuffed with $100 worth of synthetic food packets just to keep your body moving. The trapper laughed at the idea of carrying dead weight. His survival food was the ultimate superfood, invented by the indigenous Cree and perfected by the frontiersmen. It was called pemmican. He took lean buffalo or venison meat, dried it over a slow, smoky fire until it was brittle, and pounded it into a fine powder using a heavy stone. Then he mixed that pure protein dust with an equal amount of rendered, boiling hot animal fat and threw in a handful of dried Saskatoon berries for vitamins. He packed this thick, heavy paste into a rawhide bag and let it cool into a solid brick. That rawhide bag of pemmican packed a staggering 4,000 calories into a single pound. It was a perfectly balanced survival ration of fat and protein. But here is the part the modern food industry hates. Pemmican does not spoil. Kept dry and cool, a bag of pemmican remained perfectly safe to eat for 5, 10, sometimes 20 years without a single drop of chemical preservatives. The Hudson's Bay Company ran their entire fur trade empire on it. A man could paddle a canoe for 12 hours a day in freezing water, surviving on nothing but a pound of pemmican and a cup of river water. Today, the grocery store tells you that animal fat is dangerous and that you need complex carbohydrates wrapped in plastic. General Mills and the sports nutrition industry spent a century burying the recipe for pemmican. They want you buying weak, sugary protein bars that melt in your pocket and expire in 6 months. Pemmican is real energy. It costs a fraction of the price of modern backpacking meals. You can make it in your own kitchen from cheap cuts of beef, and it will outlast the apocalypse. Number 10. A man sits by a small fire in a damp forest in 1840. His canoe needs a new rib, his trap needs a new wooden trigger, and his dinner needs to be butchered. A modern camper tackling these 3 tasks brings an entire toolbox into the woods. He carries a $150 titanium multi-tool with 20 folding parts, a $200 camping hatchet, a folding saw, and a specialized outdoor kitchen knife. If a spring breaks on his multi-tool or the locking mechanism jams with mud, the tool is useless. The frontiersman carried one blade, just one. It was usually a simple high-carbon steel trade knife or a modified crooked knife with a curved blade, hand-forged from an old metal file. It cost him roughly a day's wages, and he wore it on a leather strap around his neck or on his belt every day of his life. With that single piece of steel, he could carve a wooden spoon, skin a 1,000-pound grizzly bear, mend his snowshoes, shave dry tinder from a wet log, and split heavy wood by striking the back of the blade with a heavy branch, a technique known as batoning. The outdoor hardware industry hates the concept of a single, universal tool. Stanley, Leatherman, and Gerber did not outlaw the simple carbon steel knife. They just convinced you that you are incapable of performing multiple tasks without a specialized gadget for each one. They flooded the market with gimmick knives featuring hollow handles, built-in compasses, and serrated edges that are impossible to sharpen on a river stone. The mountain man knew that the versatility was not in the tool. The versatility was in the hand holding it. A cheap, fixed-blade carbon knife from a hardware store, maintained with a piece of sandstone, will outperform a pocketful of expensive tactical gadgets. One tool instead of 40. One skill instead of a heavy backpack. Notice how the frontier mindset strips away the noise? It forces you to look at nature not as an obstacle course to be conquered with technology, but as a workshop where simple tools do heavy lifting. Up next, we are going to look at how our ancestors lit up the darkness without batteries, and how they preserved massive amounts of fresh food in the dead of summer without a single wire of electricity. Number 9. It is the dead of August in 1875 in the high desert of the American Southwest. The temperature is pushing 100 degrees in the shade. A ranch hand has just slaughtered a sheep, and he has a jar of fresh milk. He has no ice. He has no Yeti cooler. He has no Freon, no compressor, and no solar panels. If a modern camper brings a pound of raw meat into the desert without a $400 rotomolded plastic cooler filled with expensive bagged ice, that meat is rotting by sundown. The modern outdoorsman is completely reliant on a fragile supply chain of frozen water. When the ice melts, his survival window closes. The ranch hand simply takes a thick burlap sack, soaks it entirely in a nearby creek, places his meat and milk inside, and hangs it from the low branch of a mesquite tree where the hot desert wind can hit it. As the dry wind passes through the wet burlap, the water evaporates. The physics of evaporation pulls ambient heat out of the interior of the bag. Inside that wet sack, the temperature drops down to a refrigerated 50 degrees, completely independent of the blazing sun outside. His milk stays cold. His meat stays fresh for days. This is evaporative cooling, sometimes called a cowboy cooler or a wet sack fridge. It requires 0 moving parts, 0 electricity, and 0 ice. It only requires wind and water. The modern appliance industry, which began pushing heavy electric refrigerators into homes in the 1920s, needed you to forget that cooling is a natural physical process, not a mechanical one. Today, outdoor companies sell you heavy, insulated plastic boxes that weigh 50 pounds empty and cost a week's wages. When the ice turns to warm water, you are left with a useless plastic tub. A burlap sack costs $2 at a feed store. It weighs mere ounces. You can soak it in muddy water, river water, or rain, and it will keep your food safe. The physics did not change. The market just figured out how to monopolize the cold. Number 8. A pioneer family in a log cabin in 1860 is facing a long, dark winter night. The sun goes down at 5 in the afternoon. Today, when the power grid goes down, modern Americans panic. We rush to the sporting goods store to buy $50 LED camping lanterns, expensive packs of lithium batteries, and bulky solar generators. When the batteries inevitably die, we sit in the dark, helpless. We have completely outsourced our ability to see at night to the Duracell Corporation. The Pioneer family did not sit in the dark, and they did not pay a utility company for their light. After cooking dinner over the hearth, the mother takes the leftover bacon grease, bear fat, or beef tallow from the heavy cast-iron skillet and pours it into a shallow clay dish or an empty tin can. She takes a small strip of scrap cotton cloth or a piece of twisted dried moss, lays it in the dish, and lights the tip with a coal. The fat melts and wicks up the cloth, burning with a bright, steady yellow flame. This is the traditional grease lamp, or the slush lamp. 1 cup of leftover cooking fat will burn brightly for over 12 hours. It costs absolutely nothing because it uses the waste product of your dinner. It does not require a charging cable, it does not need a specialized propane canister, and it never ends up in a landfill. John D. Rockefeller and the Standard Oil Company started pushing refined kerosene in the late 19th century, convincing the public that burning animal fat was dirty and primitive. Then the electric grid arrived, and the simple grease lamp was erased from modern memory entirely. But the truth remains. If you know how to twist a piece of cloth and save your cooking grease, you have infinite light. The Federal Emergency Management Agency knows this. Their deep-buried survival manuals still list improvised fat lamps as a highly viable emergency lighting source. But the flashlight companies hope you never read those manuals. Notice how empowering this shift in mindset is? When you realize that light and cold are not products you have to buy, but natural forces you can harness with trash and leftovers, the wilderness stops looking so intimidating. You stop being a helpless consumer and start being an active producer of your own survival. The outdoor gear industry wants you helpless. They want you anxiously checking battery percentages and ice levels in the woods. The frontiersman never checked a battery. He checked the wind and saved his grease. The next two tricks on our list are going to push this philosophy even further. We are going to look at how the old-timers started roaring fires in the pouring rain without a single drop of lighter fluid, and how they preserved massive amounts of meat without salt. We are leaving the realm of simple comfort and entering the realm of hard, undeniable survival. Number 7. A hunter in the late 1800s has just taken down a massive elk in the backcountry. He has hundreds of pounds of fresh meat, and he is a 2-week walk from the nearest ice house or settlement. If a modern hunter drops a large animal in the deep woods today, it is a logistical nightmare. They immediately start rushing, calling in ATVs, and desperately packing coolers with dry ice. They drag thousands of dollars of electric pellet smokers and vacuum sealers into their garages to process the meat. If the power grid goes down, all that expensive processed meat rots in the deep freezer. The frontiersman did not panic, and he did not own a freezer. He knew how to build an earth pit smokehouse. Using his shovel or a sturdy stick, he dug a steep pit in the dense clay soil, roughly 3 feet deep. He lined the bottom with river stones and built a slow, smoldering fire of green hickory or oak. He laid a lattice of thick branches over the top of the pit, hung his strips of salted elk meat on the wood, and covered the entire structure with pine boughs and earth to trap the thick, cool smoke. For 3 days, that meat bathed in dense gray wood smoke. The smoke acted as a natural antimicrobial agent, drying the surface and sealing the meat against insects and rot. When he pulled the meat from the earth pit, it was cured. It would hang in his cabin for 9 months at room temperature without spoiling. This is cold smoking in its most primitive and effective form. Today, the meatpacking industry and zoning laws have almost entirely erased the backyard smokehouse. They want you buying factory-farmed bacon, injected with liquid smoke chemicals and liquid phosphates, sealed in plastic for $10 a pound. The earth pit smokehouse costs nothing but the sweat of digging a hole. It turns wild game into shelf-stable survival food that requires 0 electricity to maintain. Number 6. The sky opens up over the Appalachian Trail. Freezing, relentless rain pours down, soaking the dead leaves and turning the forest floor into a swamp. A modern backpacker is desperately trying to start a fire. He is striking expensive waterproof matches that snap in the wind. He is burning through chemical fire starter cubes that cost $1 each, watching them sputter and die in the mud. He is shivering, sliding dangerously close to hypothermia, relying entirely on synthetic factory products that fail the moment nature pushes back. An 18th century long hunter in the same downpour simply walks up to a dead, rotting pine stump. He kicks away the soggy outer wood. Deep in the core of that stump, the wood is hard, orange, and sticky to the touch. It smells strongly of turpentine. This is fatwood, the resin-impregnated heartwood of a pine tree. When a pine tree dies, the highly flammable sap pools in the base and the roots, crystallizing over time into a natural, waterproof fuel. The long hunter shaves a handful of curls from this orange wood with his knife. Even standing in a puddle, even while rain falls directly on it, a single spark from his flint and steel catches the fat wood instantly. The natural resin burns like a flare, burning hot enough to dry out the wet twigs he places on top. Within 5 minutes, he has a roaring survival fire. Fatwood is a miracle of nature. It is completely waterproof, it never expires, and it is entirely free. You can find it in almost any pine forest in the world if you know what to look for. The outdoor gear industry will never tell you about fatwood. Why would they? They make millions selling magnesium blocks, butane lighters, and petroleum-soaked cotton balls. They sell you emergency fire kits in waterproof plastic cases for $30 a pop. Nature provides a better, hotter, waterproof fire starter completely for free, hidden inside the dead trees you walk past every single day. The gear industry trades your deep knowledge of the forest for a shallow dependence on the store. We have conquered food preservation and fire in the rain. Up next, we are going deeper into firecraft. We will see how a simple, charred piece of trash replaces the modern disposable lighter entirely, and how our ancestors stayed warm in freezing conditions without a heavy sleeping bag, using nothing but dirt and a piece of metal. Number 5. A frontiersman in 1820 is sitting by the dying coals of his evening fire. He knows that tomorrow he will be traveling through a frozen, damp valley, and he will need to start a fire quickly to survive the night. He does not reach for a plastic disposable lighter. Today, outdoor consumers buy over 1 billion plastic butane lighters every single year. We treat fire as a cheap, disposable commodity. But a modern lighter is fragile. If you drop it on a rock, it shatters. If it gets freezing cold, the butane depressurizes and refuses to light. If the flint gets wet, it is entirely useless. When it runs out of fuel, it becomes toxic plastic trash sitting in a landfill for 1,000 years. The frontiersman relied on something that never failed, never shattered, and cost him nothing. He took a small piece of worn-out linen or a strip from an old cotton shirt and placed it inside a small metal tin, perhaps an old tobacco box. He punched a tiny pinhole in the lid and set that tin directly onto the hot coals. As the tin heated up, white smoke began to jet out of the tiny hole. He was not burning the cloth, he was baking it without oxygen. This process is called pyrolysis. When the smoke stopped, he pulled the tin from the heat and let it cool. Inside was char cloth. It was pitch black, fragile, and practically magical. Char cloth has a nearly undetectable ignition point. Even in a freezing rainstorm with wet hands, a single tiny spark cast from a piece of flint and steel will instantly catch on char cloth. It does not burst into flames, it catches the spark and spreads it into a glowing, intensely hot red ember that cannot be blown out by the wind. In fact, the harder the wind blows, the hotter the char cloth burns. He could drop that glowing ember into a bundle of dry grass, blow on it, and have a roaring fire in seconds. The outdoor industry does not want you to know about char cloth. They want you buying waterproof matches, butane lighters, and expensive plasma torches that need to be recharged via USB. They want fire to be a product you purchase rather than a chemical reaction you master. Char cloth costs $0. It recycles old rags into a life-saving survival tool. It teaches you the actual mechanics of fire rather than just clicking a plastic button and hoping for the best. Number 4. It is the bitter winter of 1932. A Depression-era drifter is caught out in the Appalachian Mountains. The temperature is dropping to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. A modern camper in this situation is terrified unless they have a $500 synthetic sleeping bag rated for extreme cold, insulated sleeping pads, and expensive chemical hand warmers. We buy single-use iron oxide packets that cost $2 a pair, give off weak heat for a few hours, and then end up as garbage. Or we buy $60 electronic hand warmers that drain their lithium batteries in the freezing cold and become useless dead weight. The drifter had no money, no sleeping bag, and no batteries. He had a wool blanket and an empty tin can he found on the side of the railroad tracks. He walked down to a frozen creek, chipped away the ice, and scooped up a can full of dry sand and small river pebbles. He set that can directly into the deep coals of his campfire and left it there until the metal was scorching hot. Using a green stick, he carefully pulled the can from the fire, let the metal cool just enough so it wouldn't burn fabric, and tightly wrapped it in a spare piece of wool or an old flannel shirt. He shoved that wrapped can into the bottom of his bedroll right at his feet. Sand and stone possess massive thermal mass. They absorb heat slowly and release it even slower. That single can of hot sand radiated intense, deeply penetrating infrared heat for over 8 hours. It acted as a thermal battery, creating a microclimate of warmth trapped inside his blanket. While the freezing wind howled outside, he slept warmly on the frozen ground. This is the hot sand heater. It utilizes the fundamental laws of thermodynamics, completely bypassing the modern gear industry. It requires no electricity, no chemical reactions, and no money. You can find rocks and dirt anywhere on Earth, but you cannot patent a rock. You cannot sell a tin can full of dirt for a profit at a sporting goods store. So the survival gear industry quietly let this life-saving knowledge fade into obscurity, replacing it with expensive down feathers and disposable chemical packets. Notice the deeper truth here. Survival is not about what you carry in your backpack, it is about what you carry in your mind. The modern world tells you that you are fragile and that nature is an enemy you must buy armor against. The men who built this country knew that nature was a toolkit and that your mind was the only gear that actually mattered. We are down to the final 3 skills. Up next, we look at the ultimate winter survival shelter that can save your life in a blizzard using nothing but a candle, and the legendary single log that replaces a heavy camp stove. Number 3. A 19th century trapper is caught high above the tree line in a brutal alpine blizzard. The wind is screaming, the temperature has plummeted to 30 below zero, and the snow is drifting fast. A modern mountaineer in this exact scenario survives only if he is carrying an $800 4-season expedition tent and a highly technical, chemical-fueled portable heater. If a tent pole snaps in the wind or the heater malfunctions and leaks carbon monoxide, the modern climber is in catastrophic danger. We have been taught to fear the snow and build artificial barriers against it. The trapper did not fight the snow, he used it. With nothing but a wooden shovel or his gloved hands, he dug into a deep, consolidated snowdrift, carving out a small domed cave. He smoothed the inside walls perfectly with his palms, so melting water would run down the sides instead of dripping on his head. Crucially, he used a stick to punch a single clear vent hole through the roof. Then he crawled inside, blocked the entrance with his pack, and lit a single small tallow candle on a shelf of packed snow. Outside, it was 30 below zero. Inside that tiny snow cave, within 20 minutes, the ambient temperature rose to a balmy 35 degrees above zero. The snow acted as an incredible natural insulator, trapping the radiant heat from his own body and the small flame of the candle. A single tiny flame completely altered the microclimate. The military still teaches the snow trench and the candle furnace to its elite cold weather operators. The laws of thermodynamics have not changed. But the outdoor retail industry desperately needs you to believe that a thin sheet of nylon is the only thing standing between you and freezing to death. They sell you fear, and then they sell you the $800 tent to cure it. The trapper knew that the snow itself was the shelter. Number 2. The morning after the blizzard, our trapper needs to boil coffee and cook a slab of salted meat. He is standing in 2 feet of fresh snow. A modern backpacker will pull out an ultralight titanium backpacking stove that costs $150. He will screw it onto a pressurized isobutane canister that costs $7 and only lasts a few days. If the valve freezes, if the O-ring blows, or if the canister runs empty, he cannot cook his food. He is tethered to a fragile piece of factory-made hardware. The trapper pulled out his high-carbon steel axe and found a dead, dry piece of spruce wood about 18 inches long and a foot wide. He stood the log upright in the snow. Using his axe, he split the log straight down the middle in an asterisk pattern, creating 6 deep wedges. But he stopped striking before the axe split the very bottom of the log. The wood remained standing, held together at the base in one solid piece. He dropped a handful of dry birch bark shavings and fat wood right into the center crack and lit it. This is the Swedish torch, or the Canadian candle. The fire burned directly inside the log, pulling oxygen through the side slits like a chimney. The fire burned intensely hot, from the inside out, for hours. Even better, the flat, unburned top of the log provided a perfectly stable, natural stovetop. He set his heavy cast-iron coffee pot directly onto the burning log. No metal stand required, no gas canisters, no moving parts. The Swedish torch is a master class in bushcraft engineering. It elevates your fire off the wet snow, concentrates the heat exactly where you need it, and requires only a single log to cook a full meal. Mountain safety research and Jetboil have spent decades convincing the public that cooking in the wilderness requires aerospace-grade aluminum and refined petroleum. The Swedish military still teaches its soldiers how to build this single log fire because it never breaks and the fuel is lying on the ground. A heavy axe and a single match will outlast a mountain of expensive cooking gadgets every single time. We have reached the very end of our journey. We have stripped away the expensive tents, the synthetic sleeping bags, the freeze-dried food, and the fragile tools. Up next is the final skill. It is the trick that sits underneath all the others. It is the real reason the modern world wants you to forget how to survive. Number 1. We have looked at 14 incredible forgotten skills. We have replaced expensive water filters with hot rocks, waterproof jackets with animal fat, and high-tech heaters with hot sand. But all 14 of those tricks are just pointing toward the final one. Number 1 is not a physical trick you can build with your hands. Number 1 is the thing that makes all the other skills possible. Elias Boone, the mountain man we met at the very beginning of this video, walked into the Bitterroot Mountains in 1842 with nothing but a few basic iron tools and the clothes on his back. When he walked out of those mountains a year later, he carried hundreds of dollars worth of prime beaver pelts. He eventually built a cabin with his own 2 hands on land that no bank could ever foreclose on. The historical record shows him occasionally buying powder, lead, and salt from the trading post. It shows him buying almost nothing else for the rest of his life. He was not roughing it. He was not poor. He was sovereign. Every trick on this list, the grease lamp, the char cloth, the debris hut, the wet sack cooler, is just a fraction of the same master skill. The ultimate survival skill is the skill of not needing a specialized store, not needing a battery, not needing a factory in another country to keep you warm, dry, and fed. That is what a true pioneer was. He was not just a rugged loner in a fur hat. He was a human being who had entirely subtracted the middleman from his own survival. The outdoor gear industry did not steal your independence in a courtroom. They did not make these old ways illegal. They just made sure that every single time you wanted to be comfortable, fed, or warm in the wild, there was a shiny new product you had to buy first. They convinced us that nature is an empty, dangerous void, and that safety only comes in a plastic wrapper with a barcode on it. They traded your deep ancestral capability for a shallow, expensive convenience. Now, 15 tricks later, you can see the shape of the trap, and because you can see it, you can start walking out of it. I am not sitting here selling you a doomsday scenario. I am not telling you that civilization is about to end and you need to go hoard animal fat in the woods. I am telling you the exact opposite. Civilization is fine. The grocery stores are open. But what is missing is that quiet, confident part of you that knows it could survive a freezing night on its own. That part of you is not dead. It is just untrained. It has been asleep for a few generations. You can wake it up. Pick one thing from this list to try this week. Just one. Save the bacon grease from your Sunday breakfast and twist a piece of cloth into a fat lamp on your porch. Go for a walk in the local woods. Find a rotting pine stump and put a piece of orange fatwood in your pocket. Or just take a tin can, fill it with dirt, heat it in your backyard fire pit, and feel how long it radiates heat. One simple trick. That is how the Library of Forgotten Knowledge reopens. I showed my teenage grandson how to make char cloth in an old mint tin 2 summers ago. When he saw that black cloth catch a tiny spark and turn into a roaring ember in the wind, the look in his eyes changed. He hasn't asked for a lighter since. Tell me down in the comments below, which of these old skills did your grandfather or great-grandmother actually use? Not what they read about, but what they actually did to survive. The skill that shows up the most in the comments is the one I will build my next full video around. The old men in the canvas coats and fur hats knew things that a multi-billion-dollar industry now desperately hopes you will never learn. But you just learned some of them today. Do not let them close the library of human capability on your watch. Keep the old ways alive. Because for thousands of years, the old ways kept us alive. Next time on this channel, we are going to look at the forgotten 2-cent powder that frontier families used to clean their entire homes, wash their clothes, and treat wounds. The exact same natural compound that a major chemical company patented and now sells back to you in 50 different plastic bottles. That one is going to make some people very angry. If you want to be here for it, tap subscribe. This is not just another camping channel. This is a dusty, forgotten library filled with books somebody hoped you would never open. Every single subscriber is one more set of hands keeping these doors open. Thank you for walking the old trail with me today. See you on the next one.